So I have with me here special guest. He's been called a sewer mermaid. He's been called a demon. To be honest, he's been called a lot of stuff I'm not even going to repeat, but I call him a friend. Welcome to the stream, Florencio.
What's going on? How's it going, Eric? Good to see you again.
Yeah, man. Thanks for doing this. Chat, could you let us know if our audio levels are even? If not, I'm going to tweak it and make it perfect for you. But otherwise, I'm gonna jump right into it. So let me preface for the people. Obviously, Florencio knows this, but we met up at BlizzCon. We did like dinner and drinks, and we're chit chatting. And I'm just asking him stuff, just making conversation. Halfway through it, I go, man, I wish we were recording this. Like this is like good stuff. And so we decided to do this. So I already know a few of the answers to these questions, but I'm going to ask all of them again and dive deeper into it. So, Florencio, can you just give me like the very top level, like who is Florencio? Like what are you about? What do you do?
Uh, what I'm about? I've been playing StarCraft since I was 15 years old. Uh, Before that, I used to play a lot of games similar to StarCraft. Chess was one of my favorite games. Uh, my brother pretty much was it tearing you up was a Protoss player in the beginning, so I kind of saw his Protoss. I was like, oh, you know what, that's a good race. And he went over to Terran, and I went to Protoss. As Protoss in StarCraft One, I was pretty pretty recognized as a strategic player. I used to create a lot of builds back then as well, and play with very little. My micro was pretty much my saving grace in StarCraft One.
Okay.
So strategies and micro was really one of my strong plays in the game. So
Nice.
yeah, I played for a long time. 2v1s, 3v3s, 1v1s, all maps. I didn't really get competitive, or at least get really good until StarCraft 2.
Okay.
In regards to like that next level.
That makes sense. Yeah. So what about streaming? How long have you been doing that?
Been doing it for about almost 2 years. 1 year solid for
Okay.
sure, but 2 years when I first started. I
Nice.
Yeah, it was because I was trying to teach people one by one, kind of like just hey, you know what, I'll teach you how to get a little bit better than your gameplay. And Jplex was one of them. He was like a noob, and you know, he liked my playstyle, but I was like, you know what, uh, I need to figure out how to stream it or something where other people can watch it and maybe learn it and like it.
Yeah.
So that's when I started streaming.
Awesome. Okay. So then as far as like how you see yourself, right? Do you see yourself still primarily as like a player? Are you trying to get as good as you can at the game? Are you more streamer, entertainer? Is it a mix? Like how do you view that?
How do I view? I think it has to do with, well, bottom line, I'm trying to get better at
Mhm.
StarCraft.
Mhm.
Trying to learn. I guess in my pace, in my own way of thinking. I'm trying not to get contaminated by other people's thoughts of playstyle, unless I want to. I want to kind of just think outside the box, right?
Sure.
Um, I played back when I was started StarCraft 2. The beginning was the Wings of Liberty. Everybody was pretty much learning off each other, and we did the same builds over and over again. Four gate rush all the time, or DT rush. Proxy was it a Korean 4 gate? They became such a norm, and I was like, you know what, there's got to be something different. So I was like, I didn't actually get warp gate back then either. But I told myself, well, I don't really need warp gate since I'm so used to StarCraft One.
Mhm.
So, you know, the one thing I actually did cancel out was my upgrades.
Uh-huh.
So I said, no, no upgrades. I used to do upgrades back in StarCraft One. I used to do uh, three forges every time and just get 111 right off the bat. But those
Yeah.
were macro builds.
Sure.
So I've had my upgrade. You know, how would I say it? I had my taste of upgrades.
Yeah, makes sense.
Like you don't upgrade. I had my share.
So, for people who are, maybe just seeing you for the first time, I guess, we're kind of like hinting around at it, but you have a very unique play style, right? How would you kind of describe that at a broad level?
On a broad level, it's just the way I see the game. So just like Printef, he actually he said something that resonated to me. That made sense. That I was like, oh yeah, I do the same thing, but I just never put it in words. He said that the earliest aggression that a Protoss player has is the probe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like Terrans have their Reaper, or Zergs have their speed, their lings. For aggression, the Protoss has a probe.
Mm-hmm.
It creates a forge, and all of a sudden you got the most earliest aggression you can for Protoss.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a player that likes to play aggressive from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. Once in a while, depending on if you're playing the person multiple turns, it's good to have like a macro build. But all in all, if I don't know you, I prefer to get you on the grind early on.
Okay.
See what you're up against and react. I think
Sure.
reactions. If I like to broaden myself, I'm a reactionary player and a freestyle player. That's how I normally sum myself up.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So let's see. I'm looking through my notes here. You already answered like a lot of my questions, which is good. Um, okay, I wanna dig into specifics in a minute, but I've got a couple more like broad level questions. So,
Yeah.
um, do you have any like kind of upcoming goals within StarCraft, or is there anything that you're hoping to accomplish in the next, maybe say 6 months to a year?
Six months a year, I'd probably say trying to get into more tournaments. That's
Mm-hmm.
one of my biggest goals. So right now I'm working on some late game plays, games that are more how would I say it? Even if the opponent sees that you're doing this build, it's about how to deny it
Sure.
versus
Yeah.
just going, okay, I can stop this play and then I'll be able to potentially get the game. So I've been working on those so I can get more into a tournament type of environment.
Mm-hmm.
So that and just grow my community and interact with everybody. It was really cool to see people at BlizzCon. Just people that are um, enjoying the game that we love. So that's just awesome.
Yeah. Right on, man. Okay, so you kind of talked about, always sort of being this sort of like creative player, right? Even, back as far as Brood Warrior, you're always kind of doing your own thing. Was there any like moment that you remember where you kind of chose that? So like for me, I don't know, I'm the kind of person where like I guess I do what I'm told too much, you know what I mean? You're like the opposite of that, right? You kind of just said, I'm gonna make yeah, I've got this blank canvas, I'm gonna do whatever I want with it. So like, was that a conscious decision, or is that just kind of you, like who you are as a person?
I think it was a more nature versus nurture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the way I kind of started off, it actually started majorly in StarCraft One, where I kind of learned that there are tactics to the game and skills and micro and all that stuff. So just having that background, when I started StarCraft Two, one of my fundamentals was to do 1v1, like 1v1s only, of course. But I would do like a one base build, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd just go, you know what, I'm on one base. Let's see what I can do with one base. Let me see what's the maximum units. And, that's what I would do for a whole season. I would just do one base builds. And so I got really good at the one base builds to the point where it was, I knew almost every scenario possible.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, well, this is what happens, and this is what happens. This is where I die. This is where I win. This is what. So even that you're collecting all that information, then the next season kicks in. You challenge yourself to two base builds, and every that has its own way of playing. Like one base builds is more aggressive. Two base builds is more use certain units to observe, to scout, and protect yourself to get a good 8 minute, 10 minute more army, and you
Mm-hmm.
move out for like a timing attack. But like a three base build is more like observer, send it out, stasis wards, revelation. You're more like you're getting your upgrades to get stronger in the late game, but you're holding yourself to you go out for the move.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually how I got a lot of my learning from, just playing one base builds, then two base builds, then three base builds, and from there, it was pretty much just whatever. What happens if he takes out my expansion? I'll go back to a one base build.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people were kind of like trying to figure out, well, how do you get all that in one base? I think it's because you turn yourself on and saying this is a one base build now,
Mm-hmm.
and you just maximize it, and you know which units are good combination with it for the timing,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't see it coming. They're like they're expecting you're gonna get an expansion or half expansion, get some probes, and you switch it up on them.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense to me. Like, I'm thinking, even within my own play, which obviously is, boring macro, but I often try to steer the game back to something familiar, right? And so for you, building out the way that you have, like, okay, one base, two base, three base, doing a season of each of these things, like for you, it's like, oh, okay, operating off of one base is familiar. I know everything that I could possibly do, everything that could possibly happen in this game. It's already mapped out. Um,
Right.
so was it exactly one season that you did with each of those, and was that Wings or?
Yeah, it was Wings of Liberty where I did that.
Mm-hmm.
I did that as well as with Hots.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do that with Legacy of the Void, but with Hots it was a little different. It was once I learned that kind of concept of how your economy, how you spend it with whatever bases you have. I started doing builds. I would say, okay, every season I'll do these set of builds for these races. Next season I'll do a new set of builds, and so I would get used to those specific builds until I master at least the main parts of it, and then I'll once I get really good at that, next season kicks in, I throw them out the curve and get new builds or I figure out new builds. So the fact that I kept myself from doing the same builds every season
Mm-hmm.
allowed me to grow and grow my tactics. Because
Nice.
it's like you're forcing yourself. You're like, no, no, no. I know you're comfortable getting these armies. I want you to not use those. Let's figure out another way. And so then you collect your builds.
Right. Yeah. 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 That totally makes sense to me. So, you mentioned printf earlier, and I think a lot of people know that I've started to learn how to do cannons from him, right? And
Yeah.
often when we're coaching, we'll get into a situation where it's like, okay, well, I could probably just macro from here and win, but instead we'll GG out and just cannon in a new game because that's what we're trying to work on, right? It sounds very much the same as kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, and you're saying that once you feel that it's already done, the learning is past, you messed up, just start over so you don't mess up and add to something that shouldn't be added to.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Exactly.
you're being efficient. Yeah.
And it's that focus of what you're saying of, I'm going to restrict myself to these tactics even though I've got other ones that might work. So yeah, that
Well,
okay. Go ahead.
it gets complicated because after you get all that, it's all about scenarios, what you're running into. So you have a list of builds, and even those builds have branches. Some of those branches add up to a moment in time that you have the opportunity to put that branch in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I could go this route now because in StarCraft sometimes you have four options. Just depends on if you could see the options. That's like really big. Seeing the options, seeing what you could do instead of like being blinded and trying to go stick to the fundamentals of make more workers, make more pylons, and get an expansion. There's a way where you can kill somebody or hurt someone, but you just gotta first see it.
Mm-hmm.
But by putting yourself in a lot of weird environments, allow you to go, okay, this one I'm gonna be able to do this. Should plan out to do this, and I'm good. I did that to a Terran. I think it was a Terran. I I cannon rushed him. He moved out to an area where it had like a background, where it had like a wall, but on the other side you can actually reach.
Mm-hmm.
But you couldn't reach by shooting, but you could reach by energy. Was it battery shield? So I
Mm-hmm.
would get a adept, send him over there, keep the mining from happening, and he wasn't able to kill the adept for a while because of the battery shield in the back.
Yeah.
And it's something not expected, but those things are sometimes a good trade-off in going you could do this or you can get more pros, more gateways, and more stalkers and play standard.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a choice, really. It's do you want to go this route or do you want to go this route?
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
never. Yeah.
So that totally makes sense to me. And okay, so this is like the thing. This is the one thing from our conversation where I was like, oh my God, like I got to bring this story to the people, man. Um, so, you talk about all these different branches, right? And all of these possibilities. And it seems like you put in so much work, and you're so deliberate, right? To create this knowledge of all these different, all these different branches of what's possible, and then what it looks like when people just look at your replays, look at your ladder games, look at your stream, whatever. It looks like just madness, right? It looks like the most undisciplined, random, like, oh, this guy's just doing stuff. And I feel like a lot of people perceive you as that, right? But when I'm talking to you, what I'm hearing is actually, you're putting these restrictions on yourself. You're saying, I'm going to only one base. You're saying, I'm not going to get these upgrades. All of these things, and you're being so deliberate about it to the point where, even if you might win a game, you would still prefer to work on what you're working on. And so that to me was just so cool. Like, that I don't know, it looks like one thing, but it's in reality, it's the complete opposite.
Yeah, I get that a lot. Oh, this is a bronze or silver, or this is a gold level. You know what I mean? I get that so much, and
Mm-hmm.
it would make sense because you don't see that normally in the professionals or in high masters. You think more structured, APMs maxed out. But just like you know how you just leave the game after a certain part of the cannon rush. I do the same thing in regards to my playstyle. I leave the restrictions there so that like upgrades, right? Uh, Upgrades are so easy to click on and get, but to try to play a 30-minute game without upgrades and the other guy's got three upgrades or so, uh, you got to be a bit creative to figure out how to get through all that.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I was always thinking, okay, well, when I get to GM or at least hit GM, if I'm learning how to get up there without upgrades, so when I'm up there, I can get upgrades, and with all the things that I've learned how to get up here with, it should be like an extra boost for my play. Because
Mm-hmm.
now I'll be playing with like three upgrades when in reality I used to play without upgrades.
Sure, yeah. So is there some element then of like, are you Piccolo training with the weighted cloak on? Are you like intentionally making it harder so that you're like stronger in the future?
Like Goku.
Okay.
You know how the gravity machine
Yeah, yeah.
go in there and you go on like I don't know how much negative gravity. I do the same thing with the upgrades. That's kind of how
Okay.
I watched Dragon Ball Z's and I love that technique. And I was like, well, that's a really good technique. Figure out another way because you put yourself some weights, and when you let those weights out, and you got warp gates, you got upgrades, you got standard meta if you want it, and then within standard meta, if you run into a position where you can branch out and go crazy sewer mermaid, you have the option. It's like there it goes. I see an option right here. I see a door. I see about three doors. Which one pisses them off the most? Because it's all about getting in their head.
Sure, yeah. Okay, oh man, we just got a giant neuro raid. Welcome to the Neuro fam. My
Oh,
name's Ara. We got Florencio here. I'm interviewing him. This will be on YouTube. This will be on his Twitch channel, I think, too. Yeah, so you can catch up. But basically, Florencio's a very creative guy. I'm interviewing him. I'm getting inside his head, and we're finding out that he is a lot more deliberate than
put my head on.
he's a lot more of a deliberate guy than he's portrayed. So we're delving into some of that. So we're just talking about, there's these restrictions he puts on himself, and it can be, crazy, really hard stuff. Like, I'm not going to take upgrades, right? And so I was just asking him. This is kind of what y'all are coming into. Um, I was just asking him, is this Dragon Ball Z? Are you training with weights on? And so now my new question is, is there a planned moment in the future where the weights come off? Like, are you one day going to say, all right, enough's enough. I'm going to play a standard style, and now I have all this to fall back on?
Yeah, that's what I'm actually using this new patch for.
Okay.
This new patch is going to be, since it's very different, I do want to change the playstyle a bit and go for both ground and, of course, new macro air. So,
Hmm.
yeah, this is the time where I'm actually starting to branch out into slightly different things. Not only just Protoss, but like going into Zerg and Terran.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is where the weights come off pretty much this season.
Nice, man. Nice. Okay, so we kind of we just touched on another thing that I think is interesting. So, you were kind of talking about getting inside the heads of some of your opponents, right? And so I've heard critics of your playstyle say things like, "Oh, he's really just relying on the element of surprise," or you know, like examples would be stuff like Nexus Rush, right? They'll say, "Oh, well, you're just putting yourself 400 minerals behind. You could just walk the units across, blah blah blah." Like, how would you address those criticisms by those people?
Uh, those criticisms, I think they're just not giving any credit to creativity. I think creativity is like a really important part of the game. And whether it works in whatever level, someone can enjoy it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like sometimes it's not about the masters or GMs or, pro gamers. Sometimes it's about the diamonds, the plats, the silvers, the gold. They got to have fun too. And some of these builds are really good for those levels, and you can really throw the game wonkers and look really good with your friends, and that's part of the fun. Some of these games are like the builds are like one time for the matchup, like say a player that doesn't know you or a player that's played you 4 times and doesn't know what you were going to do, because sometimes you can make a nexus, cancel the nexus, but make it at the corner base of the map.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks that you're just canceling it because he denied it, and you're playing mind games, and now he thinks you're on one base. So when you make it look like a one base, you're switching into a 2 base transition to go, do a timing attack. So um, sometimes it's not what you see. What you see is not what what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It could be
Cool,
a
cool.
setup.
So it's like partially you're bringing diversity for the people who and a lot of guys out there like me, they're watching GSL, they're looking at spawning tool build orders, and they're going, okay, well, I'm going to do whatever stats does, right? Um,
Right.
so part of it sounds like you're bringing people some variety there, but then also there's that competitive edge too, where you actually do think that this is the right path for you to be on to get as good as you can get, right?
Yeah. There's some builds that I have that are kind of just fun builds, but then there's other ones that I still practice more than the other builds, where it's more solid play.
Mm-hmm.
More late game play, and trying to figure out what the ins and outs of being aggressive and still being able to, like Ty. That Ty did a lot of
Mm-hmm.
proxies, but then he transitioned them. It's almost, and that's in the the pro scene. So it's almost the same way. You throw something out there, it's a little unorthodox, but if the science makes sense when it comes to what he has or what he's going to react to in the first place, because they do certain metas or certain standard builds and attacks. If you understand those and you do something that's going to be able to defend that attack at the minimum, I think it's still just another path.
Mm-hmm.
Can't have every game looking the same.
Yeah, for sure. I think Ty is a great example, right? Because he does, I mean, it's at least a handful of times a season where he'll come out with some highly technical, weird little attack, right? And it's always based on some combination of units you don't usually see, or some odd timing or something. And he really does catch people out. I admire Ty a lot for that, and it's really fun to watch, right?
Right, right. And there are a lot of micro attacks, so
Mm-hmm.
they're not really designed to kill the opponent, but they're to hurt them where you can transition into what your play is. It's trying to let them play your game.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So okay, you kind of talked you like almost talked about this, and I want to talk about it a little bit. So, um, you mentioned kind of creativity, right? And so you use words like creativity and aggression. Other people malign you and call you cheesy, right? And this is something we talked about a lot that night at BlizzCon. And I want to delve into the distinction that we want to draw here, because the people need to be educated.
Okay, I mean the way I think of it, right? So when someone does something to you and you're doing your build and someone does something unorthodox, right? And you're not liking it and you lose to it. Well, enough of those people are the ones that are going to create a name for that person, right? That outlier, that person that's the outsider.
Hmm.
They're not going to say anything good. They're not going to be like, "Oh, this guy's very crafty." You crafty player, or special tactics. Fucking, they're not gonna. They're gonna say cheesy, and they whoever decided to give cheesy, now they put a negative, sting to it. Like when you're called cheeser, it's a bad thing, right? And it's
Yeah.
like it's not really a bad thing. It's just bad people or people that were angry named it that way, but in reality, it's a good thing because this person got these many people pissed off to make it called cheese, but in reality, it's crafty, creative. Some of it makes sense in regards to timings if you're good enough or if you put in a lot of thought. There, you could string out the game very in different segments of it. So that's my thing about cheesy. The word cheese. I use it just because there's so many people at least know it as cheese. Some
Hmm.
people are starting to think cheese is a good thing too. So it's flipping it back.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Cool, man. Um, yeah, yeah. I think when a term is so ingrained with the culture, you almost kind of like have to use it, even if you're like, oh, well, this is not right. Like Artosis ranted a couple years back about the word timing, right, and how people misuse it, and he had like a whole blog post about you don't call it a timing, like unless it's actually a timing. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. Timing's like when you have an actual build and everything's structured to hitting at this particular time. And normally hits where upgrades line up or your units line up, work gates are all. That's a timing where you say this is the time you attack because everything's like built to it.
hmm,
If you're not doing that and you're doing just something like more freestyle, you're getting your bases, but you threw your units lost to you know, that's no longer a timing build. It's just you're getting two bases and you're
hmm,
gonna at least you get an idea of what you're gonna face. The
yeah,
timings have specific attacks.
hmm, yeah, yeah. You're looking to leverage something that is inherently time based, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Okay, so on the thread of people getting kind of pissed off, people saying this and that. I know on your stream you've got kind of like the wall of rage, the wall of shame, all these different things people have said to you in games. So I was looking at it the other day watching your stream, and I'm wondering like, does it ever bother you when people are super BM and rude? Like you never get GGs. People are not nice to you when you play StarCraft.
No, I got used to it back in StarCraft One, but I actually feel good about it. It just tells me that I'm doing good and I pissed them off. It's like pissing the meta off is really good for me. It's like
Hmm.
because these are the guys that are like, no, you can't do this. You can't get to masters without upgrades. You can't get to masters without work gates.
Hmm.
You can't get masters without standard meta. All these things that they've been putting like a little restraints for, I can't get there because I'm not doing this.
Hmm.
I just did it on them. I was like, all right, well, I'm going to do it without upgrades. I'm going to do it without standard meta. I'm going to do it
Hmm.
without, you know, warp gate and all that stuff. So that's what I did on my part, and I feel good about it. So when I beat them, those are the guys that I remember just clowning my builds.
Sure, yeah. So it sounds almost. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds to me almost like it's more about you know proving those people wrong that think those restrictions are real than it is about just pissing people off.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's more than anything else. To me, pissing people off is just the byproduct.
Sure, yeah.
It's like, but in reality, the restrictions is something I'm just telling myself, I can do it. I can figure out another way to do it without this. And then later on, if I need to do that, like if I need to use standard build, I'm just gonna go to a pro gamer just like everybody else does,
Hmm.
and just go, okay, I'm gonna memorize this build, practice it for a week, and I'm right back with everybody else.
Right.
To be honest with you, because I have micro. The only thing I don't have is hotkeys, but the hotkeys are I use my hotkeys differently. It's just misunderstood
Hmm.
um, back, but it is what it is. Some people are like, "How do you do without hotkeys?" Well, I don't get it. Hotkeys. There are sometimes you do need them, but um, I don't think you need depending on the race.
Hmm.
I'm playing Protoss, so there's only certain times where I think that hotkeys are really essential.
Hmm. Interesting. I didn't know that about you. And it's funny. I watch your stream a lot, but I've never. I guess there's always something so much more interesting happening in your games that I've never looked down at the hotkey bar and even like scrutinized it. Right.
It's just a Nexus
That's
on
funny.
what?
So you're doing all of your production by basically a mini map click and like a control click on say Stargates or something like that.
Yeah, double clicks, select, full selects,
Mm-hmm.
using the mini maps. I actually use my eye more than anything else. Like I'll use my
Mm-hmm.
eye for the mini map
Mm-hmm.
instead of clicking back and forth, back and forth. I just
Mm-hmm.
use my eyes to click back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you guys can always see unless you guys are looking at my eyes. But
Now,
those are, yeah,
you mean your eyes as an input device, or you mean your eyes
yeah,
as? Oh
yeah. As
no
an input
way.
device. Yeah, that's like my observer, my map observer. So I look at it every time, and um, instead of like going back and forth, that's what I do.
Huh.
Yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna watch for that now. That's cool.
yeah. So I don't use
Um.
map keys.
Hmm.
But I am, there's ways where I'm thinking strategically how I can use my hotkeys, but we're working on that.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna
For
use
sure.
pylons.
You're gonna use pylons. What do you
Yeah.
mean?
I'm gonna have specific pylons in each location and hotkey those,
Okay.
and it double hit, three, and then that will be where I want it. That
Mm-hmm.
way it's situated. It's just my way of doing it.
Sure. Yeah. So like a camera hotkey, but
Kind of like a camera hotkey, but it's a regular hotkey.
mm-hmm. Which I guess does have some advantages because camera hotkeys can be a little bit difficult to actually set, right? A lot of people will rebind keys just to make that easier, but you can only use what is it, Shift, Alt, and Control to make camera hotkeys. But your way, you could do it with almost anything, right?
Yeah, and I could just double click, and it's it's reachable.
Mm-hmm.
My fingertips can hit three, four, two, three, and four. So it'll be Nexus, then it's two, three, and four will be my pylons. So I'll know where my ninja base is, my main base, and my natural.
Interesting.
Yeah, but that's in the works.
So okay, we talked about kind of the plan of throwing off the weights and potentially dabbling in some macro styles. Do you feel like there's more to learn in terms of creative, wacky builds, or are you kind of hitting the point of like diminishing returns with
Oh no, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of.
it?
Okay, so here's the thing I've been learning. It's if you do a build long enough, and if it's a decent build, not just a one base build, Cannon Rush all the way. I mean, even Cannon Rush sometimes does have an opportunity. I'll give you an example. Cannon rushing Terran, you do it over and over and over and over again. You see a pattern, and you're like, you know what? If I cannon rush them, you get to a cap where they're good enough to either lose to it barely or they're gonna counter it somehow, having a placement of a bunker or what. So then you do it to the point where I don't like to do builds where it's like 50%, 50-50 chance of winning or losing. I like more of an 80 to 100% of win.
Sure.
So when they shut you down enough times, you're like, you know what? Let's try to extend it. So then I decided to go, okay, well, if I can contain them instead of a cannon rush, full cannon rush, do a contain. What can I do at home to, get myself back out?
Mm-hmm.
But then two things. I'm keeping the Terran from doing his build, which is getting a command center at the natural standard timing, and now they have to get a factory to deny the cannons at the front door. Things like that. Um, that allows me to do multiple things. I've started. We're working with Tempest. Been doing a lot of Tempest recently, so I'll do the cannon rush. Contain when they bust out, they go to your main base, but now you have two Tempests chasing them all the way back home as fast as they are now,
Yeah.
and and then taking it to a later game, right? So then you get to that stage, and you get to the Colossus, and you start knowing the habits. They're gonna go Marine, Medevac, Vikings, Cyclones. It's so then you counter that army with there's actually some real strong compositions that once you get to, it's gonna just destroy somebody that's not doing power compositions.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know those and you play those compositions more than most, you're gonna destroy the other person, even though he
Mm-hmm.
has units. And you can just get whatever units you want and get a big, you know group. But if you use power compositions, you just steamroll over most players, and I think that's what happens in most cases. I go for tier 2, tier 3 units, and most people go for tier 1s.
So when you talk about power compositions, you're essentially talking about getting to highly technical stuff. Is that about
Yeah,
right? Okay.
yeah. Like
Eh,
say, okay, so you start off with Tempest. What counters Tempest for Terrans? It's normally Vikings and Marines, right?
mm-hmm.
But you get a lot of Marines normally before Vikings because they feel more comfortable just steamrolling the Tempest with Marines.
Mm-hmm.
So then you get Colossus for the Marines, and then the Tempest because you already got them that caused the Marines to be produced. Now he's producing Vikings. The Tempest
Mm-hmm.
will counter the Vikings. So then after that, when they get that kind of composition, it's kind of like a death ball composition. So then you get Templars behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the Templars, the Tempest, the Colossus, and the Stalkers as some buffer, that's a really strong composition for them to even get close to. If they try to
Mm-hmm.
siege, your Tempest do a really great job. If they try to go in with Marines, your Colossus destroy them. If they try to go full on in, the Storm will take care of everything. And if they death ball, so there's real strong compositions that will outweigh most of the compositions of the Terran or Protoss or Zerg.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're thinking about it differently than what I've heard people describe. So people that I listen to, right? Again, coming from boring macro land, right? They'll talk about how composition is like, this is the end goal. You get this and this and this, and then you go fight. But yours almost sounds more like it's like a road, right? And every stoplight on that road involves your opponent losing and you winning, right? Like, it's almost
trying
like
to,
you're
or at least more time.
sure, yeah, yeah, like you're keeping them off balance the whole time, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah, yet it's more normal for you because you run into it more times than they do.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes because they're standard, they think standard, they tend to do the same thing
Mm-hmm.
that the other person that's standard will end up doing. I don't know if they talk to each other or what. Hey, bro, this is what you do when they cannon rush you.
Yeah,
You
man,
know,
I think we're all
uh,
wired the same. Like, because I'll be honest, like, I'll hit games where somebody does something weird, right? And I'm just like, I don't know what to do, and I freeze up and I get a little sad on my stream, and the chat has to kind of pick me back up off the floor, and I'll just be like, all right, well, I guess I lose, right? But then immediately, what do? I run to another macro player and I go, so this happened. What do I do to beat it? And then they tell me, and so I think that's how it spreads, right? We all have these
uh,
same ideas,
yeah. You got more of them than I do. I don't really have
right?
anybody.
Yeah.
I go, hey, what do I do? And no, I don't. I have to figure it out myself. Which,
Mm-hmm.
back to your question on the builds, they progress, they evolve.
Mm-hmm.
I start off small. Eventually, I start learning the patterns of the standard players. Once I learn their patterns, I'll learn what I need to do to kill those patterns. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have to figure out when you destroy that little pattern what they do afterwards and how do you and what's it's there's a lot of branches. That's all I gotta say.
Sure.
And
It's funny. It's almost like you're attacking the fact that it is popular, right? Because you've got a bunch of robots walking around, and we're all kind of clones of each other. We're all doing the
right,
same stuff, and so you can study it, right? We
yeah,
can't
it's
study it.
the movie. You watch the movie enough times, you already know what It's like, oh, I know this part of the movie. This is gonna happen. This is gonna. You guys are all helping me out with that because you guys are all doing the same thing over and over again. It's allowing me to build off of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you chop off your strongest goals. Terrans want to get the fast command center, deny them. Hatchery first, deny that. They try to go for the hatchery still, cannon rush it. You know, then they normally do the same thing. You pylon block the hatchery at the main in the beginning. They're gonna send their drone over to the third and make a hatchery.
Mm-hmm.
Like, very common.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like okay, he's that guy. Okay, I know how to take care of that part. You know,
Yeah. No, I totally know what you mean. I mean, this even kind of happens in life, right? Like you meet somebody and you're like, you remind me of this other person. Like I kind of have like a little mental box of like, oh, you're kind of like this, and you'll probably do these things. Like, I guess it's bad to pigeonhole people, but you categorize, I guess.
Yeah, but then there's scenarios. There's only so much you could do in the game at a
Hmm.
certain time, right? So you play process of elimination. So it's pretty much like, okay, we're at this stage. What can he not do?
Hmm.
How many gases did I see him take? Did I take one? Because all that has to apply to your calculations of which direction you want to take the game. But there's only so little. They can't have a big army yet if they're on one base. It's like a lot of people have that perception. It's like, oh, Zerg, it's 15 minutes. He should already have like a sick ass army. But if you've been keeping him on two bases,
Hmm.
the late stage battle becomes more um, handleable. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna trade in and he's gonna just have like 200 supply in like seconds
Hmm.
because he's been injecting and having a grip of money.
Sure,
So
yeah.
kind of like that.
So, okay, you talked about like, just studying what opponent has, what's their saturation, how many gases, this kind of thing. Do you find that easy to do those kind of mental calculations, or did you have to work for that?
Just I had to study my replays. It's one
Hmm.
of the most important parts. But I study the way I study them is I study all the Terrans, all the PVTs, all
Hmm.
at once.
Hmm.
I the reason why I do that and I don't just go one after the other and is because that way I can see a better pattern.
Hmm.
So by seeing like 7 Terran players in my ladder, I kind of see what they've been doing and why they do it and at what time they hit. So I have like sometimes I have like a mirror of timings.
Hmm.
Like when does a bailing bus hit? When does a road Ravager rush hit?
Hmm.
When's the Widowmine drops? And so all those, if you memorize those build timings and those attacks, it allows you kind of move around in your build to go. This is what I got to watch out for if I'm going this route. If I'm
Hmm.
going for a macro, I got to watch out for these type of plays. So it just takes a lot of time, a lot of, how would I say it? No raging. You can't rage
Hmm.
because it should be like, hey, I'm learning, and if I'm learning, then I lost. I lost, and where I lost, I got to figure out how I can win, and if I could win. If I can't, then I got to find another way,
Hmm.
to climb the wall. But as long as you stay positive and trying to figure out how to get better, you know, you will eventually do it. But you have to memorize things. You have to memorize a lot of things.
Hmm.
Timings. You have to remember your opponent's strong builds. If you can, memorize what they're doing based on what gas they're playing. I think gas is
Hmm.
the best tell for me.
Yeah.
Reading the opponent's gas 2 or 1 and knowing their builds with 2 and 1. I think those are really good to memorize. But once you do that, I think it's really good to navigate the game because you know what you're not worried about. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, so when you're doing that, right? Are you only looking at so you're batching, right? You're saying, all right, let me get 7 PVTs, right? Are you only looking at losses, or are you looking at just 7 PVTs that you played that day?
I'm looking at patterns, but it could be wins or losses. It just situations I'm looking at. I'm looking at like if he's doing a timing attack, what did he get to get it and what time it hit and what did I get? If I find that I made a Nexus before the Stargate and the Stargate was the Void Ray wasn't up yet, then I gotta redo my build where it's the Stargate first, then the
Mm-hmm.
Nexus, and test it out a bit and see if that's even gonna help. If it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't, you gotta find another solution. But you try to find somewhat the same build from different people, and you got to see what their patterns are. You
Okay.
know, when they take their thirds, when they don't. You know, there's a lot to
S-
memorize.
Yeah, geez. So, is this a matter of you like, are you categorizing as you go? Or are you like renaming replays, or do you have to literally like dig through the archives and be like, I gotta find a bunch of 111s from Terrans so that I can review them all in a batch?
I yeah, I'd segregate them. I
Mm-hmm.
do. I not just 7 or so. I do a good number of them. I normally
Mm-hmm.
go through all of them, but a lot of it's like when you're playing ladder and you tend to memorize where you lost or which
Mm-hmm.
ones you lost to. Those are the ones I search first.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go shoot. I keep losing to that proxy hatch. Zerg. what am I going to see? What am I not catching when I'm reading? I mean, I think that's the
Yeah.
most important question you should ask is like, what am I not reading? What am I not seeing? And how can I see it?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I've learned is out of a pattern, if a Zerg is going pool first, most likely it's the hatchery is at your main base or at your proxy third, or he's doing a Roach Ravager rush.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because those are the strongest things that pool first can do outside of a bailing bus.
Mm-hmm.
So by doing that, now you're checking corners. All right, pool first, no hatchery. Now I got to defend all those four things in some way within my build. I don't know which one it's going to be because they don't let you see. But as long as I create some kind of a build where it allows you to defend all that, I'm good. I can at least get to the next stage of the game,
Mm-hmm.
which is macro and harass.
Sure, yeah. And pushing them further and further away from the land they're comfortable in and closer to the land where you know everything and they kind of don't.
Well, it's sad, and just knowing the fact that if he's going pool first, he's not getting a fast hatchery. If he's not getting a
Mm-hmm.
fast hatchery, that's less larva, less injects. So sometimes it's good to, as a player, to know that because if you're a Protoss player and you're running into like say a Ling rush, you lost some probes, weather the storm, but then you feel like you're behind. You don't realize that person's behind just as much.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it kind of cools me down and lets me know I'm still in the somewhat right there in that lead or close
Mm-hmm.
instead of going panicking, and then making one more cannon, two more cannons more than
Yep.
you have to because now
Right.
you're on defensive mode and you just start panicking. I'm not going to attack right now. I normally do, but I'm hesitant.
Yep. Yeah, totally. I'm super guilty of this, right? Anytime anything weird happens, I'm like, oh, I better hunker down. I want to stay in my base. I'm a little afraid, and it's like the exact opposite of what you should do, right?
Yeah, yeah. You start turning up, going, well, should I? I should have attacked already.
Right.
The guy has nothing. You look at a replay, you're like, I could have killed him right there. What
Yeah.
was I thinking? I gave him enough time. Now that's why I lost.
Yeah, your opponent's teching and taking seven bases at once, kind of thing.
Yeah, those are things that you got to tell yourself. That way, you're like, okay, I got to scout, or I got to be more aggressive, or I got to just figure out how I'm going to send out something to scout. I've been using the sentries a lot now recently, the last
Mm.
couple games,
Yep.
for the hallucinations, because it's really important for me the way I play to catch what their structures are, in order to kind of combat the right composition or attack at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been using that a lot.
Nice. Yeah, I'm a huge fan too because my PVT is rough, man, and being able to have those hallucination scouts a lot earlier and just be able to go, okay, what the heck are they doing? I always when I queue a Protoss, I'm like, y'all are right. Toss is OP, man. This is the worst. I hate fighting other Protosses.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I don't really try to start off with the forge.
Mm.
I find it, I don't trust Protoss, but it's
Yeah.
also, I don't know. I kind of feel like the Protoss is not something that I'm really focused on as much. It's more Terran
Hmm.
and Zerg. I just find those games more exciting, and
Hmm.
just I don't know. I'm always trying to develop a really good macro game, but it's entertaining and fun, for
Hmm.
myself. And
Sure. Yeah.
I'm still trying them, but my goal has always been to design a build where you can use every unit in your race,
Hmm.
within the game in roles. Like
Hmm.
this has a role in the game, and as you progress the build, you start using all of them.
Hmm.
I think that's what I try to come up with.
Yeah. You don't like the idea of oh don't make this unit it's bad. You try to find the scenario that it's good.
Yeah, I try to
Hmm.
find scenarios when the mothership is good, how to use
Hmm.
the mothership in your plays, how to use your specific like sentries. I mean, who uses sentries too much in late game unless it's like designed to your composition to force field, but to use them as drops, sentry drops on the mineral lines and then storm. You can use them in weird ways.
Hmm.
And that's what I try to find.
Cool.
Just nice little painting.
Yeah, so that was another thing that I wanted to kind of touch on in this interview. So I know that you're also an artist, right? We see a little bit of your work behind
Right.
you.
Right.
Um, can you tell us more about your work? Like, how long have you been doing art, and what mediums you like to use, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I've been doing art since I can remember. Um, Started with tracing and then coloring, staying in the box, tracing the lines and coloring, shading. Then from there, tracing with tracing paper. I was
Hmm.
like, oh, awesome. But I think that kind of taught me to get used to how to trace and how to draw certain figures and get some muscle reflex, muscle
Hmm.
memory.
Sure.
Um, but somewhere in high school, I started doing airbrushing and then a little bit of acrylics.
Hmm.
And then after high school, I just jumped into oil base. I was just like, you know what? Let me try. I haven't painted in a long time. StarCraft. It was between StarCraft 1 and 2, so I was like, what do I do? So I was playing the piano and art. So jumped on to oil painting. I guess the way I paint is how I think of the game as well.
Hmm.
StarCraft. Details, all about details. So started with this one right here after I did like a good seven outside of StarCraft paintings.
Hmm.
I started doing this one for the stream. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna stream. I need a nice, good background, and instead of you know having to go out and find one, I was like, I can make one. You know,
Nice.
so I made the Z lot. I call it Z lot, guys. Sell it.
Get it right, everybody.
Get it
You heard
right.
it here.
Z lot.
So you don't have any like formal training then. You're just purely self-taught.
Self-taught. Yeah.
Awesome. What about music? Same thing?
Same thing. Um, Self-taught. Just learned by ear. Learned how
Hmm.
to read music on my own just by having a book and figuring this out. It helped me with, what was it, chords, just
Hmm.
understanding chords.
Yeah.
Help, yeah, chords and scales. There was a point where I was like, oh, you know what? I was like, I'm seeing a pattern with music. Like when I hear a song, there's only certain chords, and that's all. There's like
Hmm.
five chords. It's like part of a build. Like
Hmm.
in StarCraft, it's like a build order.
Yeah. Hmm.
Like this song has this builder, this song has this builder. They stay within their rules, and that's why it sounds so good. If not, it's all screwed up. It's like what?
Yeah, totally. It's these little like mental chunks, right? That allows you to kind of hold a more complex idea a little bit more easily.
Yeah, it yeah. Well, you can see things better.
Hmm.
When you know chords and scales, and you kind of go, okay, well, I can listen to a song and I can play it before it ends because there's certain rules to that song, and as long as I figure one of the rules,
Hmm.
it leads me to the rest of them.
Hmm.
And next thing you know it, by the end of the song, you're learning the chords and the melody because it's all in the rules. Just like a build
Interesting.
order. When you do a build order in StarCraft, there's rules, and sometimes you make the wrong rules. You make the wrong move to the rule, and you find out that it's no good. But then sometimes you hit the right, hit the right tone, and you're like, oh shit, this is the unit I needed to do. Now the
Yeah.
games get a lot easier, because but there are some rules to whatever units you're going with. You're going gateway. There's certain rules to that. You're going a fast Nexus first. There's a specific rule that does really good with it.
Hmm.
Um, Normally comes with upgrades. Devil Forge.
But we're not doing that.
Yeah, no, not yet, not yet. No, I'm thinking of doing that for like macro styles though.
Hmm.
The only reason I would do that is because I'm going for a Nexus first.
Hmm.
Because the only way to abuse a Nexus first, obviously, is abuse the probes, and the only way to do that is to play long-term macro, but with a late game timing attack, which is your 3/3.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
And I mean, ultimately, look, like after you've broken every other rule out there, the only one left are the ones you've imposed on yourself anyway, right? So
yeah,
the time has to come.
yeah, exactly. But it makes sense, just knowing builds and kind of figuring out that this you need this to that. Now I just gotta just do it and play with a lot of players that shut me down and figure
Hmm.
out where I get shut down. And then once you figure out that, then it becomes like the movie that you've seen over and over again, and then you're back in comfort zone.
Sure, yeah. Okay, so chat is saying they want to ask you some stuff, but before we do that, is there anything that I didn't bring up that you want to talk about? Any questions I didn't ask, that kind of thing?
Let's see. I would say probably the one that comes up the most is the warp gates.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, why I don't use warp gates? I think the for me I don't not use warp gates. It's just I choose to use warp gates when the build calls for it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like say if I'm gonna do like a really aggressive gateway push, yeah, I'll get warp gates and then warp my units as well for backup.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm not gonna do that, then I feel more comfortable in getting other techs first and being a little bit more ahead
Mm-hmm.
in the Oracle or the Void Raid or all those little timings. But like sometimes I'm in the late game and I have like 7 gateways, but I'm a very macro micro intensive player. So just flooding them, right? Just like a Terran player, when you have racks, Terran army goes over to the opponent, they do their battle, and next thing you know, they come back. There's a big army just waiting for them. Like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
we're right here. I do the same thing with Protoss. I kind of go with the Oracles or Void Raids, do harass. I'll call it flooding the gates. I'll flood the gates, and I don't have to be over there warping in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some people were like, "Well, isn't warp gates faster than gateways?" And I was like, "Yeah, if you're on point. Like if you're
Mm-hmm.
100% warping in the moment cooldown kicks in, then yeah, they're faster. But how many people actually do that?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people warp in, they go do some battle, it's intense. They
Mm-hmm.
forget that they're off of cooldown. So
Right.
instead of warping in now, they're actually late.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that people don't realize is because they go back and instant gratification kicks in, they don't
Mm-hmm.
feel it. They don't feel the
Right.
drag, right? At least comparing it to a gateway that's gonna once that Zealot turn it's done, another one
Mm-hmm.
pops in
Yeah.
right after, like no stop. And
Mm-hmm.
so I use that tactic to certain builds, but then there are tactics where I use the warp gate.
Mm-hmm.
Just common sense on some of those things where it's like even I know better not to not get warp gate.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so it almost it sounds to me like essentially what you're doing is it's kind of the same theme as what we've been talking about, right? You're setting up a game state where you're able to just micro, and you never have to stop, you never have to do anything else, or you at least have this long chunk of time, right? However long it takes to make 5 units out of a gateway.
Right.
Um, and then meanwhile, your opponent, no matter what race they are, has to be stopping what they're doing to go click other buttons and not be microing. So you're creating this weird game state again that they're
Yeah.
not going to be good at and you are, kind of thing.
Yeah, that and the fact that same thing. I would run into the same problem if I have warp gates and I'm going for hyper attacks. I
Mm-hmm.
might forget my warp ins. Same thing with them. If you're being very aggressive, but I'm using my gateways to just produce, so when I'm ready to really come in, they
Mm-hmm.
haven't produced or they haven't expanded or they haven't gotten mules or they didn't get
Mm-hmm.
more SCVs. There's a lot of little things they forgot the supply depots
Mm-hmm.
because they've been so involved with whatever battle is going on right
Mm-hmm.
then and there. So yeah, it's a little advantage. I call it an advantage for me.
So, okay, before you flood the gates, do you just make like a big old square of pylons? How does that piece of it work? I hadn't thought about that.
Warping the gates, it depends. Like say versus Zerg, I do that because I go oracles, and oracles they give you a lot of resources like minerals that you don't really use for oracles. It just
Mm-hmm.
you choke up the gas, and then all of a sudden there's like a big, you know, you got 2,000 in the bank of minerals.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been looking at replays, and one thing I look at on replays is my income. I look at the income and see when it's way too high while I'm doing a build, and if it's too high, I try to figure out what can I. Is it an expo? Do I need? Is it more? Is it gateways and zealots?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, okay, well if I go charge lots, that'll deplete all my mineral resources, and I'll be still using my oracles and not getting not weakening the oracles. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a really good complement. Just kind of like if you're going oracles in the beginning and you go carriers afterwards, and you have a big flood of mineral resources. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the carriers chew up so much minerals that
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the game plan. It's like, okay, well,
Right.
I got to find a way how that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
How your mineral income is making sense right now.
Yeah, yeah. It's the same as like Terran players when they make Hellions, right? Because they need a mineral dump.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. Yeah. Same thing. You got to figure out where you can use that. You
Mm-hmm.
know, to be, because sometimes you're like, oh, if I would have had a little bit more army, I would have took that game.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, I had like 2K floating
Right. Yeah.
in the bank.
And it's like, what did that do for me? Right.
Yeah, exactly. And you gotta, you see a pattern. You're like, this is always happening. I normally have a big chunk of mineral resources right now. What
Mm-hmm.
can I what can I add to this build at what time to make it stronger?
Mm-hmm.
But it's mineral resources. For me, sometimes it's cannons.
Mm-hmm.
Cannons are stalkers without gas. So if you see me get cannons, in my case, it's actually a non-gas stalker that doesn't move.
Awesome. Okay, I got one that I want to ask from the chat here. So, most influential pro players on you over however many years you've been into StarCraft.
Um, I'd probably say it was Squirtle back then, back
Mm-hmm.
in Wings Liberty. Parting was a really good role model with his Century Immortal
Mm-hmm.
uh, powerhouse build that he did a
Soul
long time
Train.
ago. Yep. Uh, who else? Hero. Both heroes were really good. And who else? Those are pretty much the main ones. Stats was really good. I was watching Stats a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. Squirtle was always like the very creative player,
Mm-hmm.
so I kind of followed him a lot. MC was okay. Oh, MC was good. He was just everywhere. So
Yeah.
I didn't really jump on MC too much. But that guy was really really good.
Chat wants to know what you think of Haas.
I love Haas. I think Haas is a very crafty player. I think he's figuring out the game in ways that other people haven't tried yet. And this game has a lot of different things to, especially with all these new changes that always keep going.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends. Do you want to learn other things outside of the meta sometimes just to get a little bit better, acquainted with the rest of StarCraft, or do you want to just stick to one build only and
Mm-hmm.
be like held? You can win games with it, but are you really having the full enjoyment? Are you really like when you win? Do you have like a big smile on your face or something? It's like are you are you savoring it? Some people just go for that win. It's dry, and then they're like, okay, next game. I got my MMR points. Sometimes
Sure.
it's more than MMR points.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're having fun, you're learning, you're memorizing stuff at the same time, and you're not getting too rageful. But the MMR comes with it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you just gotta be a crafty, and I think that's why I like Haas. He's
Mm-hmm.
crafty, and he showed everybody that even crafty players or creative players uh, go up there in the pro scene sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, they can definitely have success, right? We have seen it happen.
Yep. Yeah. So that was that one.
All right,
The
so let's see.
Haas.
We got a few more. We got a few more coming in. All right,
That doesn't
is
matter.
yeah, lots of funny stuff and a few I think serious questions. So is reaching the same level of skill and creativity a goal for the other two races for you?
I would love to.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm gonna do though is kind of get a couple players that I do feel like are really good at that game, that have at least studied the unorthodox playstyle that the meta is not really accepting.
Mm-hmm.
Like was it Kitrix? Kitrick is one player.
I'm not
Beach and
familiar.
Cuties Terran is a good player.
Mm-hmm.
First, like his creativity. There's certain people that I'm gonna kind of like look at and kind of see what they're doing and maybe kind of lead toward that road since
Mm-hmm.
people already figured that one out. So I kind of feel like, okay, I feel like the road's gonna be a little easier, especially since they have YouTubes and stuff. So I'm like, okay, I think I'll go for the creative players for me to
Mm-hmm.
study up on. So I don't have to do it all at once. Maybe once I figure that part, I'll figure out how to do other things that I can see. But in the beginning, I got to figure out who I'm gonna look up to.
Sure, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if there are already other people out there who have done some of the homework, it totally makes sense to kind of mine from that, right? One of the things that I remember you saying at BlizzCon that I didn't ask you tonight, um, was you said something. Let me just say a bad version of it, and then you correct me and tell me the real version. It was something along the lines of like everybody else out there, all these boring macro robots like me, right? They're studying what happens when you open gateway first and make stuff and try to have probes and more than the opponent or whatever. And so you're kind of trying to study all the other stuff, and nobody else was really doing that. So you kind of took it upon yourself. Am I getting that like even close to right?
To an extent, I mean, like I know that there are a lot of players right now that are just talking to each other and be like, hey, how do I get good? Well, you got to do this, and that, and you got to have high APM, and you got to have, this going for you. And if you don't do that, then you're not good. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So then they all follow the same structures, and then they go, oh, watch my replay. See, they all have like this blanket education,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like it's redundant, but because everybody's following that footstep, I kind of want to do something outside the box. I don't like to do something that everybody knows how to do,
Mm-hmm.
and I like to figure it out. You know.
Mm-hmm. And there's that point that you made, right, about like it's not that hard for you now. If you want to catch up on meta stuff, you could go grind that for a week and kind of mostly have it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I can go to a couple Neebs replays and kind of look at him and see why he did certain things and go, okay, like say, what was it? Stats versus Cero. I
Mm-hmm.
looked at all the replays, and Stats did the same build
Mm-hmm.
over and over again.
Yeah.
Right? He did the same build. It was his PVZ build.
Mm-hmm.
But that PVZ build, because he did it so many times versus Cero on a very important matchup, it just lets me know that he feels really strong with that PVZ build. So I just have to go over there, memorize that build, get an idea of why he does certain things, and I'll be off to the races.
Sure.
I think just understanding that I'm doing the right path. I was like, well, it's got to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Because he did it in every matchup. It's not like he did it once and then did other builds and kind
Mm-hmm.
of, no, he felt confident that there's a certain structure to this build through
Mm-hmm.
all the layers of PVZ. And if you do it right, you can, take the game, even if he knows that you're going to start up with this build.
Right. Yeah. The sort of edge is I'm going to execute better than the other person.
Yeah, I'm going
Not
to execute. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. But by seeing those builds, though, I'm like, okay, I'll take that build. I'll
Yep.
learn this build and I'll learn this build. Strongest builds that I can kind of follow,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and start there.
Nice. 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 Okay. Chat wants to know: do you have a favorite cheese?
A favorite cheese?
Yeah. Is there one that's just like a little bit more satisfying than any of the others?
It's always been the Nexus Rush,
I
though.
was gonna say that's my favorite.
I mean, I've been Nexus rushing since was it HOTS when you could do the Nexus when you used to do the Nexus Rush cannons.
Hmm.
That was beautiful. And then
Yeah.
the Nexus what is it the pylons
Hmm.
overcharge. You get
Yeah.
me? So it's a really good game. You guys should watch sometime. It's uh, I make a Nexus in some guy's base. I have a mothership. I make gateways and pylons, and they're like, "Well, this isn't the old patch. He can't make Photon out of the Nexus." And all of a sudden, it's coming out of the pylons,
Hmm.
and or vice versa. And the opponent didn't even know what was going on. It was a really good game though. It's
Yeah.
what was it? It was Florencio versus. I have to tell you. I'll check it out in a bit. Frost GG. There it is. Florencio versus Frost GG.
Okay. Yeah, and
Uh,
I'm sure that's like on your YouTube, right? If people want to.
yeah, yeah. If you guys want to check that, or just go on YouTube and click on that. It's a really good game, but it's just three different ways to cannon rush.
Okay.
The old way, the new way, and then of course this newest way right now with the recall the probes. So I think that's my favorite build. Outside of that, my other favorite is probably I'd probably say like the gateway, the proxy 4 gate versus Zerg.
Mm-hmm.
I always tend to piss them off. I did that to a person recently, like what 2 games ago.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Something subtle, but people don't really expect me to do it. That's why.
Sure, yeah. Okay, so another one, you kind of are, we already talked about this a little bit. You said, mostly you you view kind of, people having a pronounced emotional reaction to your play as kind of a success, not because you want to make people upset or angry, but because you successfully won the argument, right? That you can be creative, right? It's kind of what it means. But someone in chat, I forget who, already asked, has anybody ever said anything that really did strike home, or it just doesn't phase you?
No, it doesn't phase me.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's to me, it's all about me learning. So my mind's not even really on why he's tilted or how he's
Mm-hmm.
tilted. But it's also learning with a little bit of tilt. Like I do kind of the way I want to play an opponent is my at least my ultimate goal is for you to play me and you know that there's no way you can beat me in this particular game. You know,
Uh-huh.
where you draw your answers and it just didn't work and you just mentally just fold.
Mm-hmm.
You get me? I think I kind of try to go for those more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
I want to mentally get you to the point where you're exhausted and you just say, I don't have an answer. I'm
Yep.
out of there. You know, you just
Yeah.
GG out. I try not to kill you. I'm like always trying to like, okay, I'm gonna take another base. What the fuck? Yeah,
Yeah.
you're just like I'm not. No, no.
Oh man, I'm
So
grinning and laughing because I know this feeling you're describing, that you try to like put in other people, and I'm so guilty of it. I've been actually trying to work on this a lot, the past like ladder season or so, of like trying to cultivate in myself that like strength and that tenacity to not just be like, well, I'm confused and tired and I feel sad about this game, so I'm gonna quit. Right? It's like, well, no,
right.
you might not be dead. Like, I used to GG so early, man, and it was always to stuff like that too. So I've been learning. I'm
It's
trying
a
to get
mental
stronger.
thing. It's something
Mm-hmm.
you have to figure out your own. You know, because it's gonna be in that game. You're gonna be feeling tilted, and you're like, should I
Mm-hmm.
stay?
Yep.
You know, it's sometimes just stay. You know, I would say stay, even though you're gonna lose. At least you're gonna see how long you lived. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you might pull it off.
Yeah, for sure.
And those are the fun games. They're like, oh shit,
Oh
can't believe it.
yeah. I mean, that actually, that is how I convinced myself to finally start staying in games. I was like, wait a minute, like Twitch chat and YouTube are gonna love it if I can ever pull off some crazy comeback, and I'm never gonna get those if I'm a quitter, right? Like, it's
Right,
only if
exactly.
you stay in.
Yeah, exactly. It's and I think on my side, I stay in more times than most because as a creative player, I too. You're still like you're always in limbo. It's always shaky.
Mm-hmm.
But like for like a standard player, like once their standards already off the rail, it's easy for them to just say, you know what, I'm just gonna write this one off. I'm done. You know, write it off. It's already gone to like La La Land.
Mm-hmm.
Just I'm out. I'm out of here.
Yep.
You know, so I kind of feel that a lot of them do write it off, and they just forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
It never happened.
Yeah. Definitely, definitely. All right, I'm gonna ask you one more, and then I'll let you go. I know I'm taking a lot of your time here tonight, but all right. So,
Okay.
what, other than the probe, what is your favorite unit?
It's Oracle. Definitely,
Oracle. Interesting.
definitely the Oracle.
Because of the utility, or?
It's a unit that not too many people use
Mm-hmm.
as much, and I've been using it since what is it? Legacy? Was it HOTS?
Mm-hmm.
It's a quick unit. It's a fast unit. It's fragile, but at the same time, there's so many ways you could piss a player off with mass oracles. Like you can, it's I don't know. It's just it's fun. You're all over the map. You're killing stuff. You're back out. You revelate. You stasis. There's so many things I do with mass oracles.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful. I don't know how many people I pissed off in Zerg. with math circles. But then you dance at the same time. You know how many
Yep.
people like disco on their creep? You know, it's like, yeah,
I mean, there's no question they do have the best dancing mode. I don't think anybody can argue that
yeah. That's that disco dancing is just beautiful. Pisses people right off.
one. Awesome, man. Well, Florencio, thank you so much for taking the time. We got, if anybody missed it, scroll up. We dumped his Twitch and his YouTube in the chat.
Oh,
That's
thank
where
you,
you
man.
can check him out. Anything else you want to leave the people with before I let you go?
Yeah, just watch your replays, get better, and come to our stream and ask a lot of questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man. Florencio takes so much time on his stream to help teach people and explain stuff. I learn something every time I check him out. So please hop over there, give him a follow, give him a sub, make it rain on this man. He's saving esports.
Play the Florencio Files with Pig. Oh,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Florencio. Okay, so actually, I kind of just assumed that everybody would kind of know you from that, right? But let's see, like, Florencio Files
Let's
number
go,
one.
guys. Let's cast
So if
ourselves some fun.
y'all know Pig, I'm sure. Go check out the Florencio Files. This is Pig studying Florencio replays and kind of casting them in an over the top way, I guess you could say. Is that fair?
yeah, it's definitely a soap opera. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, so that's a really good time. I think that's actually where like a lot of people know you from nowadays, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, a lot of them coming from YouTube. A lot of them are resonating to the plays,
Mm-hmm.
to Pig's type of casting towards me. It's a really good. I don't know. It's a combo, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Well, yeah, thanks again, Florencio. I really appreciate it, man. It was a good time. I'm gonna hop on the ladder and do some boring stuff, but I'm gonna not be a quitter. That's my takeaway. I'm gonna look at
Yeah.
my replays. I'm gonna not be a quitter.
All right. Sounds good, Eric. I'll catch you around.
All right, man. Thanks so much. Take
All
care.
right. Later, guys.